The American horse industry has a $177 billion economic impact on the US economy, and that number is growing. The NFL generates $20 billion a year, which makes the horse industry 9 times larger than the NFL. And yet our industry is shrinking. We've got more money flowing in right now, but fewer horses and fewer people getting involved in participating. And in all of the research that I've been doing, I have not found a single source that has actually dug into what is driving our industry to grow economically while dropping in participation like it is, in the way that it's actually happening. So that's what we're going to dive into today, because it doesn't matter what level of this industry you're involved in. What is driving this situation affects every single one of us. And as an industry, we have to actually understand what is going on. So let's go ahead and dive into it here. And I want to start with the full picture because it's important that we have the facts right from the beginning here. So the American Horse Council released their 2023 economic impact study, which revealed $177 billion. That's up from $122 billion in 2017, which is a 45% increase in just 6 years. And at the same time, jobs that are supported by the horse industry grew by 33%, which was from 1.7 million to 2.2 million jobs. But the horse population dropped from 7.2 million to 6.6 million. So we have more economic growth and more jobs, but fewer horses. And that is the paradox that we have to actually understand. So for comparison, golf is the closest sport to horses in terms of culture and demographics. And golf has a $226 billion economic impact. But a big difference is that golf has mainstream television coverage every single week. And they have massive sponsorship deals. And they have a nationally coordinated youth pipeline. The horse industry has none of that at scale. And we are still nearly in the same economic conversation as the golf industry is. The NFL is at $20 billion, golf is at $226 billion, the horse industry is at $177 billion, and the average person in the horse industry and the average American has no idea. There is a gap between what we actually are and what we're perceived to be. And that is part of the problem, but it's also part of the opportunity. And so before I get into the history of how we got here, I want to take a second to mention what makes it possible for me to be able to do this kind of research and do these videos and try to serve you guys the best that I possibly can. If you're a horse professional who is serious about building a business that actually reflects the high quality results that you provide through your work, I want to give you our horse business playbook completely free. This is a proven step-by-step process that we've used to help hundreds of horse professionals build, grow, and scale their businesses. And when I say successful, what we mean is one that gives you the financial freedom, the time freedom, and the ability to actually serve your horses, your clients, and your students that you want to be serving, that you're meant to be helping at the highest level. Because we do not believe that you should have to choose between doing great work and building a great business. You should be able to do both, and you can do both. So you can get that playbook completely free. I'm going to link it down in the description. And when you get your playbook, you'll also have the opportunity to schedule a completely free strategy call with us. And that call is for horse professionals who have a clear vision of where they want to go in their business, but they need a plan, a pathway of how to actually get there. And on that call, we will look at where you're currently at your business, where you want to go, and map out exactly what needs to happen to get you from where you're at to where you need to go. So you know that's for if that's for you or not. If it is, link that down in the description. It's completely free. If you don't need the call, you can definitely get the playbook. If you want the playbook and the call, you click that one link and you'll be able to get all that right there. So let's get back to it. To really understand where we are, we have to understand where we came from. So in 1900, there were 21.5 million horses and mules in the United States. That's roughly one horse for every 3.5 Americans. And these horses were not pets. They were not part of a hobby. They were part of the American infrastructure. Every product that got moved, every field that got plowed, every city that was being built, horses were part of making that happen. And by 1915, the horse population had peaked at 26.5 million horses. Then came the automobile and even the tractor. And over the next 45 years, the entire working relationship between Americans and horses was ended. By 1960, the U.S. horse population had fallen to 3.1 million, from 26.5 million down to 3.1 million in less than 2 generations. But then something happened that most people don't actually connect to the horse industry: television. By 1959, 30 Western series were airing simultaneously in prime time. 7 of the 10 top-rated shows on American television were Westerns. You had Gunsmoke, Bonanza, Rawhide, The Rifleman. What that did for an entire generation was make the horse aspirational again. And it wasn't because people owned them, but rather because they watched them every single night. And the generation that grew up watching that drove the recreational horse boom that ended up following. By the early 1990s, the horse population had nearly tripled from its 1960 low. The American Quarter Horse Association went from 600 registered horses in 1940 to over 6 million cumulative registrations. The horse industry was being built on cultural aspiration, and television was that engine. But then both of those advantages disappeared at the same time. The Westerns began fading off of prime time late in the 60s. By 1971, the production companies were officially saying that the Western idea is out. And the generation that grew up on 30 Westerns a week had children who grew up with 0. Then 1986, the Tax Reform Act hit. Before 1986, horse investments were structured as tax shelters, and that act eliminated that overnight. Florida's thoroughbred industry reported losing a third of its operations in a single year, right? Yearling prices dropped 17% immediately, and the industry had not fully recovered before the next wave and the next hit actually arrived, which was 2008. And the financial crisis hit a lot of industries hard, but for the horse industry, it was absolutely devastating. As we know, horses cost more money every single day, whether they're being ridden or not. You got board, you got feed, veterinarians, farrier. Those costs do not pause. And when families lost income, horses were among the first things to go, right? The values collapsed, and animals that were worth $2,000 or $3,000 were now selling at the auction barn for just a couple $100. And at the same time, the domestic horse slaughter market had just been shut down. The last U.S. facility closed in May of 2007. And I'm not going to make an argument right now about being for or against that, because that's a separate conversation. But what I'm saying is that removing that market mechanism combined with the worst financial crisis since the Great Depression created what researchers described as the perfect storm of negative price impacts for the low to middle horse market. And there was no floor, right? Rescue organizations were being overwhelmed. Horse abandonment increased significantly, and a lot of people got out of the industry and never came back. And so the horse industry has been navigating the consequences ever since. We've seen a 23% decline in the horse population over the last decade, and there's been a complete erosion of our youth demographic. The proportion of horse owners under 35 has been cut nearly in half over the last 15 years. And we are now competing for participation against every other option that families have for their kids, whether it's soccer, lacrosse, volleyball, basketball, gymnastics. All offer lower costs of entry. They have clear organizational paths. They have more mainstream media presence, and we're competing for the same families. And we have not built the infrastructure that makes us competitive for that. And here's where I want to shift to, because I'm not interested in pointing out problems and then just leaving it at that. We have to focus on real solutions. And other industries have faced almost exactly the same situation that we're facing in the horse industry. And some of them have actually figured it out, and we can learn from them. And the one that I keep coming back to is golf, because golf's story looks almost identical to ours in the horse industry. From 2003 to 2018, golf lost 6.8 million players and had more than 1,200 courses close. Their base participants were aging. They had high costs. The culture was very exclusive. They didn't have a youth pipeline. And from the outside, it looked like the sport was in terminal decline. There was no coming back from it, right? It was going to be a has-been thing. And then two things happened within the golf world. The first thing is that the major golf organizations, the PGA, the USGA, the PGA Tour, Augusta National, LPGA, organizations that had historically operated independently, agreed to jointly fund a unified youth infrastructure. And they called that the First Tee program, which has reached 10.5 million young people. The PGA Junior League now has 81,000 kids competing nationwide for $120 a year. They have a drive, chip, and putt, which is free. It's nationally coordinated, and it's held at Augusta National on Masters Sunday. It's broadcasted live on national television, right? They built a pipeline. They coordinated, they funded, they went nationwide. And from 2019 to 2024, junior golf participation grew 48%. And the second thing that happened in the golf world is Top Golf, right? And this is a low barrier, very socially oriented format where someone who's never picked up a club can go walk in and have a great experience at a Top Golf for, one of those types of businesses. And more than half of non-golfers that visited a Top Golf said that it increased their interest to play traditional golf, right? They created an on-ramp, right? Then they built the infrastructure to catch the people who wanted to go further. And the horse industry has not done either of these things at scale. We have approximately 100 to 150 different equestrian organizations that historically do not cooperate. They do not coordinate. They don't work together. We don't have a nationally funded youth pipeline. There's no mainstream accessible entry point that gets regular people that are not involved in horses, that don't have any experience, to actually be able to experience what it's like at an affordable rate without having to own horses or have a huge financial commitment. And overall, we have pieces of the puzzle, but we are missing some critical things. We have IE8, right, which is the Interscholastic Equestrian Association, right, that runs team-based competitions for middle school and high school students, and then you have the college level version of that. And we do have certain business models like the English lesson barn model that has proven that, you can have facilities that own horses and structured lesson packages that people can come out that's more affordable than just owning a horse. And a lot of that stuff works. But we have not connected the pieces or been able to build the structures out there that can be invested in at scale to get more people involved in the industry. And here's what I want to leave you with on this. My entire career has been built right here in the horse industry over the last 15 years. And I've been blessed to train horses for clients for more than a decade. And I've watched this industry evolve from being on the training and the selling side to teaching clinics all across the country, to developing online education programs, to now spending most of my time serving horse professionals and helping them build profitable and sustainable businesses that serve their horses and their clients and their students at the highest level. And the thing that I keep coming back to at every level of what we're talking about and dealing with in the horse industry is the problem is not the clients and the problem is not the horses, because the horse is one of the most powerful experiences a human can have. And there's nothing you can do to fake that. There's nothing you can do to replace that. And in a world that is increasingly more synthetic, more AI driven, where authenticity is getting harder to find, the horse is one of the most real things that are left. And there is a growing hunger in our culture for real, for exactly that. And the problem is that we have not built the infrastructure to let people access that experience on every level, from the person who just wants to ride once all the way up to the professional who should be able to make a real sustainable living doing what they love. And that gap is creating a massive participation decline, which is ultimately costing us growth across our entire industry. And the truth is that a rising tide lifts all ships. The path to larger purses in competition, to more sponsorships, to more media coverage, it all runs through more people being involved in the industry. More people learning to ride means more horses are needed, more trainers are employed, more facilities are viable, more shows that are attended, and more people who are engaged and involved in following this sport in this industry and participating, even through carrying through who wins a competition to actually getting out and getting hands-on with these horses. And we have more raw material to work with than even golf did when they were going through their own predicament. The cultural movement is there. We've had Yellowstone come out. the ranch culture resurgence is there. The homesteading movement is growing. There's a hunger for authenticity, and the door is open in a way that it has not been open in decades. What we need are people in this industry who will stop just complaining about the problems and actually start working towards a solution. And that starts with understanding the full picture, which is exactly where I wanted to start in this particular video, because this is just part one. We're going to continue diving deeper, and going into the full history, the business model solutions, and what other industries have built that have actually worked and what that looks like in the horse world. And at some point, I want to get the right people in a room together, people with real influence and real investment in the future of this industry, and have that conversation publicly. And so, if this resonated with you, if there's something you agreed with, if there's something you disagreed with, if you got your own thoughts or your opinions on this, share them down in the comments. I'd be very curious. What do you think is the single biggest barrier to bringing more people into the horse industry? I genuinely want to know what you think, the problems are, what the solutions are, and share that in the comments, because our voice needs to be heard. We need to come together and collaborate and share our experiences to find a real solution to this. And if you're a horse professional that's trying to build a business that actually works in today's economy, that's exactly what we do at Horse Business Builders. I've linked that down in the description below. You can get that free playbook. You can book a free call with us, a free strategy call. I appreciate you being here. I'm grateful for your time. My name is Colton Woods. Together we rise, and we'll see you on the next one.